All right. Well, hello again, everybody. We are back with the second edition of Inside Trucking with James Lamb, and I'm your host, James Lamb. Like it or not, you got me. So here's what's going on. Today is September 4th of 2025, and it's a very solemn day today because today is the day 8 years ago that Connor passed away as a result of the accident in Florida. And of course, you know that SBTC has picked up the torch. We're working with his family in terms of creating Connor's Law. And, you can learn more about Connor's Law on change.org/Connor's Law, the Connor's Law Facebook page. Melissa has put out a new website that's on the page, is also referenced. So Melissa's his mom. And so we just want to, first of all, start off our program today by expressing our condolences to the family of Connor and all his friends and family who miss him. It's been 8 years, since he passed away on September 4th of 2017. And so I wanted to do a whole program today, as a matter of fact, about Connor's Law, but we're going to save that for another day because we have a lot of breaking news that's happening, and we want to report that to you today as it happens. First of all, we watched the UCR Plan Board of Directors meeting today, and there's so many things going on there, so many things that are wrong. That whole system is illegal. Our lawyers have told DOT that. We've proven that because a regulation was never promulgated back 20 years ago. But these folks they keep on trucking, I guess you would say, in our terms, and things are going to catch up with them very soon. Today was about renewing contracts, for staff, and I don't even know where to start. We will have some very interesting news to bring to you as soon as we receive our attorney's legal opinion on a civil RICO case against the UCR plan. Whether or not we have a case, and all indications indicate that we do, and it could be a class action. UCR plan has taken in $2 billion in the last 20 years, all predicated on a authority and a statute and a program that was never properly implemented. So we're not sure what we're going to do with that yet, but we're collecting information, and when our attorneys legal opinion comes out, we'll have more information about that. But in the meantime, I don't even know what to say about those people. We'll come back to that another time. Here's the breaking news for today. Freight broker transparency. Something huge happened today, and I'm going to be one of the first, I hope, to bring the story to you in classic Inside Trucking format. And so here's the deal. So you know that SBTC was the first trade association back on May 6th of 2020 to petition FMCSA for stronger broker transparency rules. And it took, a few years. It took until March of 2023 before FMCSA decided to approve our petition. Now, of course, about 2 weeks after we filed a petition, OIDA filed a petition. Imagine that. And pretty much said the same things as we did, although they did contribute, in quite a good fashion, and they did suggest some things that we had not thought about. So we'd like to think that this is a team effort now, right, Todd, between SBTC and OIDA about freight broker transparency. Of course, our nemesis organization, TIA, Transportation Intermediaries Association, for those of you who have been following me for the last 15 years, that I've been fighting with those folks back in the day that Chris Burrows was still in Pampers and Mr. Voltman was the CEO. That we've been fighting the big brokers on things like trying to put the little brokers out of business with bigger bonds and all sorts of things. And of course, transparency is where it is at for the last 5 years. So, we started this, and finally in November of 2024, lo and behold, the FMCSA, interestingly, right after Mr. Trump got reelected, finally promulgated, or I should say commenced, a notice of proposed rulemaking for broker transparency at our request. So our request was approved back in 2023 for this rulemaking. OIG's was approved. They were combined into this one docket. TIA did one. Let's, take the rule away outright. Let's repeal 49 CFR 371.3, right? And they were denied in March of 2023. So all indications up until November of 2024 indicated that FMCSA was on board, moving forward with broker transparency to make it stronger. Our arguments throughout this entire 5-year period has been that those big brokers that are out there that are kind of skating around transparency rule, putting waivers in their contracts, they essentially are engaged in evasion of regulation and quite probably unreasonable restraint of trade under the Sherman Antitrust Act. So we presented those issues multiple times, and now something interesting has happened. I'm not going to say interesting because it's something lousy has happened, and quite, frankly, it's bullshit. It's just not right. And so here's what's going on. So within the last few months, there was a meeting, and the meeting was held by the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy. And during that meeting, our people at SBTC were there, our attorney and lobbyist, Lauren Sochi, and TIA's people were there. And at the end of this roundtable meeting, the SBA decided to play Switzerland. And they decided to say, well, on the broker transparency issue, the truckers want transparency, and the brokers say, that it's not something, it's not a rule that we should have anymore because things have changed. This is a rule that goes back to the 1930s, I think it is, 1939 last time I looked was the first iteration, and then it changed, again in the 80s. But for all intents and purposes, this is like, conventional wisdom going back 75 years at this point. And TIA says, oh no, we can't have transparency. And there's a lot of issues. We're going to have to break a lot of this down in other shows. I'm going to have to do a show on, on what we call, day trading, brokers being day traders and engaging in something called service arbitrage. So watch for that show, because that's going to be, an interesting one, because we're going to talk about, are brokers really brokers anymore? Are they like other brokers? They say they're not, for the purpose of needing to be transparent, like stock brokers and insurance brokers and, real estate brokers. Oh, we're not that type of broker. Well, what kind of broker are you? Well, we're a kind of broker that, shouldn't have to be transparent, because why should we disclose our margins? And so we're a special type of broker. You're not a broker. You're actually a day trader. You know what they're doing? They're flipping freight. But we'll save that for another time, because here I want to talk to you about this new thing that just came down. So today, the Department of Transportation and the federal government as a whole, actually, they released what's called the Unified Agenda, and that's kind of like the plan that's supposed to come out twice a year. I guess in the spring and in the fall, and the spring version of the 2025 Unified Agenda just came out today on September 4th. Somebody's got to tell the federal government it's not spring anymore, and they're supposed to issue one in the fall, and geez, it's almost fall now. But lo and behold, today September 4th of 2025, they just issued the spring agenda. And there's a RIN. And this is like RIN is basically like the rulemaking numbers that they issue, and there's a RIN that's in this agenda, and it's the same RIN that we've been following for the last 4 cycles of this agenda. It's RIN 2126-AC. My eyes are going here. I think that says 63. Yeah, I blew it up. So 2126-AC63. You can look this up on reginfo.gov. That's the government agency that manages the unified agenda. So it finally came out. We've been watching for it every day, and lo and behold, here it is today. And there's something in there that says, or gives a hint as to what's going on. Now, they talk about the NPRM, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, that they last issued November 20th of 2024. And, they opened up the comment period, and then they closed the comment period. And then SBTC said, hey, for various different reasons, people still filing comments at the 11th hour. Why don't you open it up again? And they did, and then they closed it again. And now the latest entry on this RIN document is that they are planning to issue a second NPRM, May of 2026. So first of all, they're delaying this again. And for those of you who have been following this and fighting for this with us and fighting with comments and, pressure on members of DOT and the bureaucrats and members of Congress and all sorts of things that you folks have been doing, you're as upset as we are because they're kicking the can down the road again. And, I just had a meeting with the chief counsel of FMCSA on August 8th, and Jesse Ellison, and you saw him with Secretary Pete last week, right, when they were cracking down on the states of California and Washington and New Mexico over English language proficiency, which we applaud and which we think they're doing a great job on. And, we're very thankful that they're going in that direction. But in that meeting with Mr. Ellison and with Larry Minor, I brought up our concerns, and I said we're concerned about what you might be about to do, and we really weren't allowed to talk about it because they set the ground rules that we're not allowed to talk about rulemaking, and so I kind of expressed our opinion without talking about the rule, but they said, we'll let you know what we're doing when the unified agenda comes out. Well, guess what? Today, the unified agenda came out, and now we know what they're doing. And what they're doing is they're kicking the rule down the road again. So in other words, everything that they just did, they're stopping, and they're doing a do-over. All those comments that you put in, all for nothing now, because they're going to issue another one, and they're going to say, why don't you comment on that one, right? This has been going on since May 6th of 2020, folks, and now we're going to go into 2026. So there's stalling tactics that are going on here. There's, delays. There's unreasonable delays that have been happening all throughout. We thought we were over that, but now we're back to that again. And now we're faced with starting over. Now, whose idea was it to start over? The SBA Office of Advocacy. Because right after that meeting, which our folks went to and TIA's folks went to, they issued a letter, Office of Advocacy, to Secretary Duffy. And then they issued another letter a little while later, a few weeks later, to the FTC and to the U.S. DOJ that deals with antitrust. And it was almost the same exact letter. It was almost a duplicate thing with respect to freight broker transparency. And that is, SBA says, what we should be doing here is we should be having the DOT start over with negotiated rulemaking so that the DOT entertains both sides, the broker side and the trucker side, the carrier side. But folks, we did that already. We did that in multiple ways. We did that through our petition. OIDA did it through their petition. TIA did it through their denied petition. There was a one of those sessions that that they do where they invite people in, and then let's talk about the the issue in December of 2020, and then they made the determinations, and they basically found with us, they said, truckers yes, brokers no. We're not going to repeal transparency that's been in effect for 75 years. We are going to look at strengthening it. And now, here we are, and SBA has gotten involved on behalf of the brokers, but not the small brokers. They've gotten involved on behalf of the big brokers. Now, let's think about this for a second, folks. Tell me what's wrong with the Small Business Administration advocating for the position of big brokers, because TIA represents big brokers. You know how I know? Because I used to be the president of the Association for Small Brokers. And in fact, all of those people joined SBTC when I launched SBTC, because we realized this should not be about brokers versus carriers and truckers, folks. This should be about big business versus little business. And quite frankly, what happened is TIA influenced the SBA and purported to be representing the interests of small brokers. And Bruce over there, no offense, took the bait, and he went with it, and he wrote the letter, and he passed it on to his boss, Chip. And so now they've written to DOT after hearing SBTC, other small trucker interests, and TIA, and they have regurgitated the TIA position and presented it as the position of small brokers. When I saw this email, I think it was back in May, early May, this first letter came out. When I saw this, I went back to Bruce and I said, what are you talking about? I said, first of all, you should be representing small business. And second of all, when you're saying, DOT should start over and do negotiated rulemaking and listen to both the small brokers and the small carriers. No. It's not the small brokers. Who at your meeting was there that constitutes a small broker? I said to Bruce. And Bruce said, well, yeah, there wasn't really anybody there except for TIA. So TIA is telling you, Bruce, that they represent the small brokers, and you believe that? TIA is the trade association for the multi-billion-dollar third-party logistics companies. Any small brokers that they have, those are not the brokers that are putting in waivers of 371.3 in their contracts that TIA is representing. And you know how we know this? Because the TIA put out a model contract for its members, including their small business members. And there's no waiver in that model contract. So what that means, Chris, is you're telling your small broker members that in terms of best practices, it's a good idea to use your model contract that doesn't call for truckers to waive their rights under 371.3, right? And so we said that to Bruce over at SBA Office of Advocacy, and Chip, and Stephanie, and all those people over there. And then we said, this is a scam that you're perpetrating on DOT. And we told Secretary Duffy about this. And we told FMCSA about this. And we furnished them with the same information, including that model contract. And we said, if in fact this were the true position of small brokers, then TIA would put it in their model contract, right? So it's all bullshit, okay? And this time I'm going to say it straight out. That's what this is. In fact, this is corruption, in my opinion, by the Office of Advocacy. And I feel so strongly about that the minute I got off the email with Bruce and SBA Office of Advocacy, I went to the Inspector General and I filed a complaint as the executive director of the Small Business in Transportation Coalition, which has been petitioning for 5 years for stronger broker transparency rulemaking. And the SBA, the SBA OIG looked at our complaint, and they, a lot of times they get complaints and they say, yeah, there's nothing to this. We're not doing anything about this. Oh, no, not in this with them. Not with this one. They said, Mr. Lamb, we got your material, your information. Thank you for sending that to us. And your complaint is of concern. So that means that they too think something fishy's going on here. Why would the Small Business Administration represent the interests of big brokers purporting to be representing the interests of small brokers? That doesn't make any sense, folks. There's something seriously wrong there, like corruption, collusion, really bad stuff. Why would they do that? That's not their mission statement. Kelly, I sent you a few emails about this, right? You got to look at what your people are doing here, because this is not cool. This is corruption. And so the Inspector General is doing its thing. We wrote to the SBA Ombudsman, right? That's supposed to help you with federal agencies, with regulatory fairness and all sorts of stuff, right? Usually it's an agency outside the SBA. This time we complained to the SBA Ombudsman, Robert Bolden, about the SBA Office of Advocacy itself. No response. Nothing. Wrote to Chip, head of Office of Advocacy, asked for him to chime in on this. No response. So this is corruption. They don't want to admit it. OIG is raising their eyebrows. SBA OIG. And in the meantime, it looks like this nonsense, which we believe, you'll see our argument on Twitter if you go on to, at the SBTC, our Twitter page, and you'll see that we think that this is official misconduct by federal employees. There's a statute for that. We think that this is undue influence by TIA, because TIA has no business talking to the SBA when they represent the multi-billion-dollar companies, one of which is being sued by one of our board members, TQL, by Pink Cheetah Express, Dakota, right? Over freight broker transparency. So, we even filed a complaint a few years back with TIA, an ethics complaint against TQL, and we said, hey, best practices, model contract, you guys seem to be going to bat, for these big 3PLs that are, the top 3PLs. TQL's number 2, second only to C.H. Robinson. And, why are you doing that when you put out a model contract that doesn't have a waiver in it? What's going on? And shouldn't you be holding your members, including your big members, the ones that last I checked, pay in $14,400 a year in dues as opposed to maybe $600 for a small broker, right? Who do you really represent? It's in the money. Follow the money, right? So we asked them to enforce their ethics policy through an ethics complaint. They ignored it. Still haven't responded. It's been 2 years now, I think. Brushed it under the rug. And I filed ethics complaints before with TIA, and back when Volkman was around, he didn't like me, I didn't like him, but at least he made sure that the ethics complaint was processed. Not the current leadership, including Mr. Burroughs. No, we're just going to sweep that under the rug and pretend we never got that. And after I filed that, you know what I got? Cease and desist letter. Cease and desist for what? For filing a complaint? Telling the truth? So, this is total corruption. And that corruption is a cartel. It's TIA, in my opinion. It's TQL, in my opinion. It's DAT and Canadamo and all those people, in my opinion, that are all in conspiracy, I believe, to violate antitrust law. I issued a cease and desist letter this past week, to Ken Adamo for his defamation. Okay? I'm telling you, I believe he is a crooked bastard who should be in prison for antitrust violations, criminal antitrust, RICO. You should be in prison, Ken. You should shut your fucking mouth, and you should be in prison. Okay? And come after me with defamation. I dare you, because we'll get to the bottom of this. We'll get to the bottom of this through a civil RICO action. I promise you. Okay? And I'm not so sure that I'm not going to sue you for defamation just for the hell of it, to make an example out of you. Okay? Because you don't get to go around and call people grifters, racists, xenophobes. You don't get to allude that they're criminals. You're the criminal in my mind, Ken Adamo. So we'll be dealing with you. Okay? We'll be back, and we'll talk about you. But in the meantime, we're talking about SBA. There's some serious problems going on here. So now what we see is the plan worked. TIA went to SBA, Office of Advocacy, and they cried about representing the small brokers, and the small brokers, they don't want transparency. I haven't heard one small broker, and I have a number of them on my board and in my organization. Nobody from the small brokerage industry has said, yeah, no, we want to fight transparency tooth and nail, because they do business the right way. They are transparent. They don't do what some of these other big brokers we're discovering are doing, which is tell you that it's 40%, or they tell you it's 14% commission, average margins they call it, and then it turns out we get documents through transparency when it gets enforced, at least one time, through Dakota, and it turned out not to be 12% or 14%, the numbers that Voltman and TIA and Ken Adamo at DAT try to tell you about. No, it was 40%, somewhere around there, that the broker took from Dakota. And so there's a big scam that's going on here, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg. And you're going to see these people fight back. You know what they did to me the first time I started talking about transparency, right? Remember those articles in Overdrive? Look them up. Todd Dills, back when Todd Dills used to cover SBTC and talk to me. 2014, Lamb is bringing in transparency. Right after OIDA and TIA made a deal to stop talking about transparency, so that they can agree on a bond amount. And the big brokers would take OIDA's insurance, right? So that's what they did to me last time, okay? And it failed. That hit job didn't work, because I'm still here, and I'm still talking about transparency, and I'm still calling out people who are, in my opinion, the ones who are the real fraudsters and grifters, okay? So there are people that are tricking you, folks, that are trying to make you believe that the average broker margins are 12.5% right now. That's what Adamo says, right? Except ask him if that's the average commission that a brokerage makes in terms of gross margins, or is it net profit margins? That's the question he doesn't want to answer. He doesn't want that asked. In fact, back in December of 2023, when I started asking that, magically I got blocked by Ken Adamo and DAT. And I used to be partnered with DAT. I used to be partnered with them in two respects. In the private sector, in terms of my private business, and then as SBTC. And we now figured out what's going on here. What they're doing is they're throwing out rates that they want the truckers to accept and they want the brokers to use, and they want to tell you it's okay. Those are really good market rates, because brokers are averaging 12.5% margins. Yeah? Why don't you say commissions? Because brokers talk about commissions. Ever sell a house before? Ever hire a real estate broker? They said, I'll sell your house for 4%. You know what the percentage is in advance. There's no question about what you're going to pay for the service. And then when the sale actually happens, the buyer gets to find out too, right? The buyer finds out on the closing statement. It's all right there. But we can't have transparency in freight brokerage. Oh, no. Because we don't want anybody digging. We don't want you digging, lamb. So we're going to call you a grifter. We're going to try to cancel you on Twitter. What a bitchy little thing to do, right? So that's what's happening. So now government is colluding with big business, and they're making a case why we should start all over. We should have negotiated rulemaking. Well, that's what DOT has decided to do, folks. And I'm very disappointed. And I'm hoping that after this program airs and after they get my emails, they'll rethink that and they'll stay on the current path and not go back to the drawing board. Because truckers don't win if you go back to the drawing board. The idea here is big brokers are about to lose. And they've convinced the SBA to be their champion. I'm sorry, but the SBA should be the champion of small business truckers and small business carriers. And yeah, small business brokers, but they're not the ones that are hiding their commissions. Ooh, margin, sorry. You know the difference between gross margins and net profit margins? You know what the scam is here? I've posted it on Facebook. Let me just tell you, okay? Okay. If Ken Adamo tells you that the average broker margin, without defining what that means, is 12.5%, in that case, what they're doing is they're talking about net profit margins. And they're trying, I believe, they're trying to mislead you and imply that if it's 12, let's just for argument's sake, let's say it's, I don't know, 15%, right? Then what they're trying to say is, trucker, when you go to the load board and you take a load and you use our tools for rate making and you see the load being offered, is the right percentage, or the right amount for that lane and that equipment type and, the season, whatever it is. In that case, they want you to believe, after filling your head with, broker's average margin's 15%, let's say, then they want you to believe that you're getting 85% of the load. And you're not. And we know because some documents have leaked out. Back in May of 2020, one did. And then one was seized by the DOT, by a transportation specialist in response to Dakota Springfield's complaint to the secretary. It was seized from TQL. They didn't want to give it up. And it was given because they forced them to. And that document, as we understand it, because we then filed a Freedom of Information Act request for the results of the Freedom of Information Act that Dakota put in, right? She got a copy of that letter, right, from Newsom that told them a directive. That's the whole basis of her lawsuit right now against them, right? An order saying stop putting waiver language in your contracts and comply with 371.3. Well, we found out all about this because we duplicated what she did. We put in a FOIA request too. So we have all the information, not from her, but from FMCSA FOIA unit, right? And so we know what the deal is. We know the numbers because FMCSA told us. And we know that it's a 40% commission, just about, which means she got 60%. Give or take a percentage or two, because there was a lumper involved. So when we look at that 40%, what that means is the brokerage got that 40%, right? Now, I taught freight broker training for a very long time, all around the country, okay? Including at Houston Community College for a number of years. And I know that brokers hire agents to work under their broker license, remember, I used to help people get motor carrier authorities and broker licenses and all that stuff, and then I would teach them how to launch their brokerage business. So I know all this stuff. And I'm a former DOT investigator, right, back in the 90s. So I've been around the block for a few times. I've been around this industry for 32 years, so I'd like to think I know what I'm talking about. And so when I would teach introduction to freight brokering, in that case, I would tell people that when you hire agents, you should expect that you need to pay your agent the going rate. Going rate was about 60% of the take. And that meant the brokerage would take 40%. Well, depending on which brokerage you work for, how good you are, that percentage, that sales commission on the load can be anywhere from 60 to up to 80% of the broker's take. So if we go to the example where TQL netted 40%, if you do the math and you take, I don't know, 60, 70% off the top, that goes to the agent. What's left for the brokerage? About 40 or 30%, right? That's where the number comes from. That's where the 12.5% commission comes from. So they want you to think that they're only taking 12.5%, the brokerage, and the trucker is getting the rest. They want the trucker to think that. They want the shipper to think that. They don't want the shipper to know that they're overcharging for trucking services, right? and contributing to consumer increases, right? In inflation, consumer price increases, right? Because what happens? Shipper pays more, consumer pays more. We all pay more, right? You're paying more. So the problem here is that they're playing games with numbers. The data guy at DAT, Canadamo, is playing number games because that's what statisticians do. That's what data analysts do. They play games with numbers. And he's playing games, I believe, with you. And so what's happening is he's telling you a number that you think helps you understand what the average is that a trucker gets and what the average is of a broker gets, but it's really intended to confuse you and muddy the waters, I believe, because the numbers being given to you are not the gross margins, they're the net profit margins. We figured it out. People don't like that we figured it out. The cartel doesn't like it. Craig Fuller doesn't like it. He said some nasty things about me. Ooh, he's going to say some articles about me, right? Try to do a hit job, right? Okay. We can play games like that if you want to. But when people watch videos like this and they hear what the truth is, they're not going to believe the nonsense, okay? These people call themselves Freight X, and they are a cartel, in my opinion. So you know what we did? We decided we're going to have a name too. We're the good guys. They don't think we are, but we are the good guys because we're telling you the truth. We're telling you the facts. We're helping you understand what's going on. We're exposing the corruption and the collusion and the conspiracies and all that stuff. Don't get me started on the conspiracy against me because I'm still waiting for a FOIA request from FMCSA that would prove it. That's 9 years old. They don't want to give me the info because it would tell us who was behind that hit job on me. Who do you think it was? I think I know who it was. In fact, I do know who it was. Now, this is what's going on. Your government, SBA Office of Advocacy, has listened to TIA and has taken the argument of the big brokers, reframed it, and has made it into the argument of the small brokers, who were not in attendance at that meeting, who are not really represented by TIA, who are probably using the model contract that doesn't have the waiver language in it, right? And they've basically listened to TIA. TIA has undue influence, and they have shaped it in a letter to other government agencies like USDOT, that's doing this transparency rulemaking right now, NFTC, and U.S. DOJ. And they're making the same bogus claim. So you need to speak up, folks, especially all you people who did all that work trying to get other people to file comments. I'm talking about the Noahs that are out there, and the Mike Bostons, and the Blakes, and the Jamies, and the McKelveys, and all you people that are out there that you work so hard. Okay, you need to speak up now, and you need to say this is not cool, and you need to go to the Inspector General at the SBA. I'd say go to the Inspector General for the DOT, but I filed so many complaints with them, and they've never done anything. So don't even bother. And it's not even in their jurisdiction, because this is about what the bureaucrats, or I call them the Corruptocrats, in the SBA Office of Advocacy have done. They've pulled the wool over the eyes of the Secretary of Transportation. No pun intended on my last name. They've pulled the wool over on the antitrust enforcers at FTC and DOJ. And they've purported that they're talking on behalf of small business, and that's just a scam. That's fraud, and that is a RICO investigation right there. Because now people have been induced to act. The Secretary has acted through the FMCSA, and they are now going back to the drawing board, and they're starting all over on freight broker transparency in property broker transactions, or whatever they call it. So that's what happened today, folks. And I'm bringing that to you as breaking news, and I'm telling you this is what's going on. Those folks are Freight X. We are the Freight A team. We got cool music that goes with it from the 1980s. You'll love it. Join the Freight A team. We're truckers.com. If you're a trucker and you're pissed off that you're getting the shaft by big brokers and now corrupt bureaucrats, then join the SBTC. Just join online at truckers.com. Become part of the Freight A team. Join me and join our lobby and attorney folks, Lauren Soshi, and join Pink Cheetah, who's leading the charge in court on freight broker transparency. We are the people who invented this through the May 6th, 2020 petition. Everybody else followed, okay? So please think about becoming a dues-paying member. Pitch in. We're the people who stopped your speed limiters because we threatened to sue them because they have no jurisdiction. Lo and behold, they threw that out the window because they knew we were right. We're the ones that are behind English language proficiency. Those guys, ATU in Arkansas, are doing a fantastic job in the state, and they've highlighted this problem with non-domicile licenses. I applaud Shannon and Harvey and all those guys. But folks, listen, we're doing this at a national level. And we have created a coalition. And a lot of those groups like NOAA and ATU have joined that coalition for the purpose of promoting Connor's Law. I wrote Connor's Law, all right? English language proficiency bill. So, folks, look, there are a lot of issues that are going on. We don't have time to talk about, all of them beyond what I just mentioned. But please, it's time to step up. It's time to speak up. It's time to cough up your dues. It's $75 a year. I'm not going to divide it like OIDA does by the day and tell you how many pennies it is and all that. You can do the math yourself. Okay? It's $75. And it's the best $75 that you'll pay this year for advocacy, because we are the most zealous advocates, relentless. Somebody recently said, Chris, right, from past Time for a Change, who we're talking to. All these folks are recognizing that we are leading these charges, and they're getting behind us, and they're forming partnerships with us. And we ask that you do that too. Become a member of the coalition. Join SBTC. Become part of the Freight A team. Reject those other clowns calling themselves Freight X that are perpetrating, in my opinion, this scam and fraud on the industry. Brokers are taking about 40%, folks, and they don't want you to know. And that's why they're fighting transparency tooth and nail. They don't want to actually really take 12%. I started a brokerage just as I was getting attacked by these guys. And you know what the name was? 12% Logistics. We were going to do it the right way, and we were going to put our money where our mouth is. We were going to actually tell you how much we took because it's in the name of the company. And then these guys, under the guise of fighting fraud, fought competition. And that's not cool in America. You all have the right. I spent a long time operating a permitting business where I took guys who worked for trucking companies and I helped them realize the American dream. Be a business owner, start something that's yours, and operate your own business and better yourself. And these guys don't want you doing that. These guys don't even want to pay you at certain times, like May of 2020, the bare minimum cost to operate a truck, right? Remember that? 57% was a mile, and it cost like $2.35 a mile. That was ridiculous. Everybody parked at the White House and screamed at Trump. Well, guess what? Things are tough again, and it's time to speak up. It's time for you to tell the government, the Inspector General at SBA, that this is unacceptable for this kind of nonsense to go on. And somebody's got to clean this up. Elon did a great job at the beginning of the year, right? Doge. We need somebody to clean this up. So please contact FMCSA and scream about this. What do you mean you're delaying it further? What do you mean all the comments don't matter because you're going to start again because SBA told you, because TIA, their puppet masters, made them do it under the guise of representing small brokers. This whole thing stinks. So, listen, take some of these guys, with a grain of salt, especially when, they start to try to take down the people who are telling you the truth and are actually pointing where the fraud is. There's an old adage, folks, and it's a Nazi strategy. You remember that. And the strategy is, accuse your adversary of that which you yourself are guilty of. That's what's happened here. In the last 10 years, it's happened with me, it's happened with other people who step up, try to fight this cartel. It's time for us to band together, and it's time for us to say enough is enough. So with that, I'm James Lamb. This is episode 2 of Inside Trucking. I thank you for spending some time with me today watching this program. More to come. We got a lot to talk about, and we'll be doing more episodes shortly. So with that said, once again, today's Connor's Day. So if you all would please take a moment at 10:30 tonight and remember Connor, who died at 18 years old on September 4th of 2017, we'd really appreciate that. All right, folks, take care. I'm James Lamb, and thanks for watching.